Allan Clarke was born in 1987 in Trinidad, West Indies, and lives and works in Detroit, Michigan. Clarke received her BFA in photography in 2011 and an MFA in interdisciplinary practice in Maryland in 2014. Clarke has been an artist in residence at the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture, the Vermont Studio Center, Lighthouse Works, and Yaddo. She has received several grants, including the Toby Devon Lewis Fellowship, Franklin Furnace Fund, and a Puffin Foundation grant. Clarke is an assistant professor in Detroit and is represented by Zander Gallery, based in Cologne, Germany, and Paris, France.
This is The Hidden Critique, where we discuss art, race, and higher education at the intersection of an MFA. I'm Marlon Tobias, pronouns he, him.
And I'm Krystle Lemonias, pronouns she, her.
Welcome to our show.
Welcome, Allana. We're so happy to have you on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yes, we're so excited to have you, Allana, and definitely ready to dig in and what your artist journey has been. But because mental health is important in life, especially when you're living this artist entrepreneurial lifestyle, I want to start with Allana. How is your heart?
Oh, yeah. Good question. How do I answer that? I don't know. My heart is the heart of a human living in the world right now and dealing with the multitude of terrifying, joyous, scary, profound, and amazing and terrifying moments.
Mm-hmm.
They're just constantly shifting. So whatever kind of heart that is, a person that feels all of it.
Yeah.
I could definitely relate. I definitely understand. How about you, Chris? How's your heart?
I think very much in the sentiments of Allana. Like I feel a push and pull in just the energy of our community and getting so close to, voting. Some already vote by mail. Others are waiting for the actual 7th. I think there's a bit of anxiety in the air, at least where I am, that is heavily conservative. And yeah, I'm trying to still find some peace within all that is taking place around me. Mm-hmm. But how about you, Marlon?
My heart, my sentiments to you too, but my heart is also just a little stressed, because on top of, like you two just mentioned, all of the things in the world and in this country that are going on. But on top of that, I have a lot of balls in the air that I'm juggling, and a lot of deadlines and just a lot of moving parts that can aid to that stress a little bit. As you both know, to be an artist is essentially to you have to wear many hats, right? So in my case, I'm an educator, I'm an artist, I'm a podcaster. And so, to manage your week holding all of these very important things that you have to hold, it could get a little bit stressful. And then of course the weather's changing, and so we're the season is literally in a place of transition. So maybe that is also something in the air that we feel, even though autumn is a very quaint type of season, just that transition period is still, you have to adjust. So So yeah, I'm definitely feeling those feels that you guys are feeling as well.
Oh, well, let's take a trip down memory lane to maybe soothe some of what we're feeling today. Allana, I would love to learn a little bit more about your formal education experiences. My first interaction with you, just kind of tangentially, was watching you in a peripheral as an educator at adjunct at the time at a university that we both went to and as an undergraduate. And I was always fascinated by what you were doing and how you spoke about your work and working with students. So tell me about your formal educational experiences.
Yeah. I am like public education born and bred through and through.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
So hopefully I can be a testament to the power of public education.
Mhm.
But yeah, I grew up in Queens, New York, mostly.
Where in Queens?
A few different areas, but like mostly like Jamaica, Queens.
Oh, I was born in Jamaica, Queens.
Oh, okay, amazing. At that, I
Small
forget what the
world.
hospital is there, but
Booth.
I think it might be.
I was born in
What
Booth
now?
Memorial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't think the hospital exists anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But small
Anyways,
world. Yeah.
yes, yeah, oh, fantastic. And so, like, I kind of always say, like, I didn't know I wanted to be an artist. Like, I feel like so many people, like, they are like, oh, since I was like 5, I knew I wanted to be an artist. I feel like that came to me much, much later in life. When I had to start making, that transition from high school to college and like thinking about like what it is I wanted to do with my life. And also like, I was the first person to go to college in my family. So like the whole kind of process was incredibly bewildering and like incredibly foreign. But I, kind of ended up going to a community college in Queens. And I, like, for whatever reason, kind of decided that I would study photography. Like in like high school, that like senior year, everyone's like talking about college. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's the thing that I should do next. I don't know.
Yeah.
That seems to be what everyone else is doing. And then I, got all these like college catalogs and just like flipping through programs and like kind of kept coming back to the art programs and specifically like the photography programs. And then I discovered how one would pay for college and then realized that the schools I was looking at, I could never go to. And then and then being like, okay, I can go to CUNY. I can afford that, through like various grants. And then, I ended up at a community college in Queens where I, kind of started studying with a really incredible photographer that then kind of shaped my desire and understanding of like what it meant to be a creative person. And then kind of, just like that moment of discovering the thing that I wanted to do in life kind of led me through these other stages of like wanting to go to graduate school, but then also wanting to also be an educator, like becoming so inspired by, some of the faculty and specifically like Black faculty that I had that really created this like supportive, nurturing, and transformative educational experience for me. And I felt so kind of inspired by that I wanted, that to also become a part of my life. So not only making art, but really thinking expansively about what art is and being on kind of both sides of that like paradigm as an educator now.
That's awesome. And so tell us a little bit more about when you went off then to an MFA program. What prompted you to do that? And, how did that kind of support establishing your career?
Yeah. Well, because I think throughout undergrad, like I was just a ferocious learner. And only in art, though. Nothing else. Not math. Not science. English or classes or like literature classes. I was definitely ferocious there as well.
Yeah.
But like I was always like, and I got my undergrad in photography. So like I was always that kid in the, dark room, like 24/7. And then I kind of somehow then became the person everyone else would ask questions to, like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? And like through like those experiences as well of like me, teaching my peers how to do a thing, like that always felt so fulfilling too. And so that kind of idea of like, being inspired by the people who were teaching me, and then those experiences of like teaching someone else, like I then was like, oh, I maybe want to be an educator as well. And then I also I think very early on, that constant question of how do I make money as an artist?
We're definitely going to get into that a little bit later for sure. But yeah.
And I was always like, well, it's probably not going to be just selling work. So I have to because I'm not rich either. So I have to figure out some practical aspects. And that was coming from me, but also my dad, why are you doing this? And what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah.
So again, early on, very much having to think about, okay, I want to be an artist, but how do I make money? And okay, maybe teaching. So then I, through talking to other faculty or teachers, they're like, well, you have to get an MFA. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get an MFA. That's going to be my next step so that I can kind of just continue on this trajectory. But then I also just, again, wanted to continue having those opportunities to be in community, to be in this structured environment that would allow me to make that I could also kind of grow with peers, right? And learn about other people's practices, in this formalized way.
Did you go to grad school straight out of undergrad, or was there a gap period?
Yeah. So I tried to. And so I got the portfolios and the essays all together. And so I did apply to graduate programs during my senior year of undergrad. I did not get into any MFA programs, but this was 2014. No. Yeah. Yes. 2014 or something. I'm very bad with years, and it's been so long ago. But
yeah.
2011, 2012. I finished undergrad. I think 2011. And this was then during a time when these programs called postbacks were becoming a big thing. I don't even really know if they're that prominent anymore, but basically they are 1-year certificate programs that allow people the time to kind of prepare an application with the resources of an academic institution for an MFA program.
A postbac, is that post-baccalaureate?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, okay, yes, I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
I've never heard of this. So this is addition to a BFA?
So it's a post BFA, but pre MFA. So it's this little in between. I mean, I think it's actually just a financial move by institutions to capture more students.
Okay.
If I'll be cynical about that.
Interesting.
So I did get into I got rejected from the MFA programs, but then the schools offered me, they're like, oh, hey, there's this other thing that you are actually eligible for if you might be interested.
Okay.
Yeah. So then it felt like actually a really interesting opportunity because, again, I could have that support, but it was more kind of independent work where I could, begin to focus on, okay, well, what are my actual ideas, right? So it's not that undergrad format where it's okay, here's a class. Now there's 3 projects that you create, in this course. But it was okay, I have my own ideas. I just need access to resources and people for feedback.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And so I know that at least from what I see of your work now, it's heavily into abstraction and material based and really luscious in its texture and just all that's happening in there. Is this something that's coming from your exploration as a graduate student, or is this something that you developed more after and in residency? Because I know that you've done a lot of residencies as well.
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel for me, it's intertwined. But I feel like right now I'm like in the space that I ultimately wanted to be in. But I had to work through a lot of iterations and various ways of working to kind of get here and at the point of understanding that I have about my practice and what I want my work to be, what I want it to do, and the conversations that I want to create around my work. But, because my background is in photography, right? Very traditional, black and white, dark room. But then, like, as I continued to study, I realized that there were other things that I kind of wanted to explore, right? Or like also kind of like some problematics of photography, especially like documentary style photography, where you're kind of going out into the world and capturing, for me, it was like other kind of people or situations involving people. And so like the fact that I am, and also like some of the language of photography too is very kind of like hierarchical or like predatory, or it's like, right, capturing or shooting or taking. So I started to like think about like some of those problematics a bit more conceptually. And like I've come back to photography, but in a completely different way. But at the time I was just started to kind of question the ways in which I was engaging in the medium of photography and beginning to feel like increasingly uncomfortable with that, and kind of questioning like the agency of the people's images that I was capturing, right? Which like after I took their image, they didn't have agency over it anymore, right? Because then this image can exist in a market. It's then that object develops its own narrative and its own system, and kind of, again, like I felt like taking something from a person. And so like through those kind of like internal conversations with, myself and like what I want the work to be, I decided to turn the camera on myself, because at the very least, I felt I could give myself the ultimate permission to be, the subject in the work, to be the thing that is probed and explored and deconstructed, right? And so, yeah, so then in that way, kind of performance and video became central parts of my practice. But then I was still working in a very like, figurative manner and representational manner, but through kind of my incorporation of like sculpture and thinking about the performative potential of materials, not just bodies. And that happened in like the last few, like 5 years or so. So thinking again, like kind of expanding this like questioning, not only thinking about bodies and how they perform, but thinking about materials that can also represent bodies and how they can perform and then like exist on their own through these interventions between myself and in the studio. So I think like it's all related, and working in one way got me to this kind of ultimate space of kind of freedom and like interconnection.
Wow,
Nice.
that's a lovely exploration. It feels like you're jumping from like stone to stone as you're like picking up these breadcrumbs that's kind of tangentially connected, but is built on these experiences and these questions that you've asked for yourself along the way. Very fascinating.
Yeah, and I definitely want us to keep talking about your studio. Right now, like, what are you exploring and what are you working on in your studio?
Yeah. So I am kind of working on a series that will be for like a few shows coming up next year. And so I'm working with a material called hair bonding glue. And it's a material that I've been exploring for, the past few years. And actually, I've been exploring the material for like a decade now. But again, like thinking about like representation, figuration, and then like, creating this line to abstraction, but also like everything still being about the body. Because like when I first started working with the material, it was in grad school. So that was like 2012, 2013. But I was working with it where I was like making videos, or like I made a video that like utilized the material, but still thinking about it in like it's like kind of traditional sense. But it's also like a very expensive material.
Yeah.
So it was like, something that then was like on my mind, still interesting to me. And I knew there was something to continue to explore, but I, kind of had to put it on the back burner until like the right kind of moment emerged, that where it was like time, space,
Funds.
money. Yeah. that could get me back to exploring it. So yeah, a few years ago, I was like able to do that, like at a residency.
Was that Next Haven, right?
Yes. Yeah. So that was like, 2020. That I did that residency and had
before or after COVID, or before or during COVID?
Like a month before COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. So we started the residency, like my group, it was like January of 2020, and COVID really full blown like March. So we had like 2 normal months. But luckily, like the way the residency was structured, like we all already had our own private studio space, where like, there's just one hallway. You go into your studio. You don't actually have to encounter anyone else. So they just decided not to shut down the residency. Like so many other, friends that I knew who were at residencies, those like closed down. Everyone had to like get out, get away. So we actually then had like this beautiful opportunity of like, again, taking the good with the very bad, like everything that was happening outside, but at least still had that like beautiful opportunity of like quiet and having access to our studios. So like the support that residency provided, I think really was the catalyst that allowed the work that I'm making now and that like kind of trajectory to develop. Like I think without it, I definitely would not have, So I think very fondly of Next Haven and its impact.
I can imagine. I remember, I think prior to that, I had just finished undergrad, and I remember hearing that you got into Next Haven, and I was like, but I knew off you, like, and so I felt like there's hope for me. Someone I know.
I know. There is hope in this world. There is hope.
And I remember how I think it was, I started following you on Instagram and really watching you exploring this material, and the development of it was, it was exceptionally the words to put it. It was exceptionally fascinating and just exhilarating and inspiring.
For you and me both.
Because I'm like, ooh, bonding crew, that's expensive. Like a bottle of that is like, to see the amount of bottles you had on the floor and then how you were moving it and using your body, I was like,
It was an incredible discovery. Really, really powerful for me. And so like, and also it just seems like there are infinite possibilities with the material, because it is so incredibly intelligent that, like, I'm always saying, like, it is not me doing a thing and controlling this material. It's a conversation between myself and material, because it's intelligent. It has a life of its own. It wants to do what it wants to do. And I'm like trying to probe and pinch and twist and and conform it, and it responds and I respond. So there's this like just beautiful, incredible kind of back and forth that is always exciting and engaging and surprising, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for me, like, that is what I want my work to be all the time. Like, that is what I find to be incredibly beautiful and profound, because there are no like predeterminations. It's all about process.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about presence and being in that moment with material and really just kind of shutting out anything that's not happening right then and there in the studio space.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that for me is so incredibly powerful and a charged space.
Yeah, I think that the fascinating thing about you using this material is in so many contexts is like the relationship that it has to Black women and the in some ways the covering of your hair to well protective, but then also adornment, and then also in some cases the connotation with European standards.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it touches on so much that prior to you and a few other contemporary artists working in abstraction in this way that is also conceptual, I can't say I fully connected to abstracted works, but but I find in thinking about how you are using this material and its context in a culture that we share, and then also the subculture of being Caribbean, it's I am just floored. And it makes me want to learn a little bit more about some of these the visual context of, well, your unique voice, and then how do you, I guess, foresee these other disciplines that you're interested in? I know performance art, you've mentioned your photography and just visual literacy. How does that impact how you are working?
Yeah. Because I feel like, you know, how I describe my practice, think about my practice, it's all about like intersections and overlaps. There is no singular way in which I work, or even any like bodies or series of works that I make. It incorporates multiple processes and methods. Like, you know, even if something ends up being understood as photography, but it is very much performance, right? Because I'm utilizing my body. If something ends up, you know, kind of being understood as sculpture, it is still very much like in utilizing many different methods of working, where it is like time-based media, right? And performance. And I ultimately think of myself as a performance artist. I feel like that's the foundation of everything. So funny, because I used to think performance art was so stupid. I was like, oh, anyone can do that.
That's funny.
And it's funny because the way, like, I was thinking like, oh, anyone can do that as an insult. But now I think, yes, anyone can do that. And that's powerful. We can all engage in performance, right? Because through performance, you are thinking critically about your body, about your subject position in relationship to others and other things, objects, entities, experiences, histories in the world. We need more of that. We need more body consciousness, I think, to create connectivity and understanding. So yeah, I'm a performance artist, and I engage, you know, with making at many intersections.
But I'm curious, what are some things that you are downloading while you're in the studio? Like, do you, what kind of listen do you, or music do you listen to? Are you listening to podcasts? Are you are you going through any books or anything, or reading any books? Sorry.
So like while I'm working in the studio, definitely always need something to listen to so I can just like stay focused and in that moment. And, you know, it really just ranges, right? So sometimes it's music, sometimes it's podcasts, sometimes it's audiobooks.
Any in particular? or that you're
Yeah,
currently listening to? Or because I know for me, I go through waves of like, I need to listen to this type of music, and this particular type of music is really getting me activated in the studio, and then that runs its course, and I find another genre of music that, or
yeah,
audiobooks, I need to listen to some type of
yeah,
thought pieces that are going on.
yeah.
What in particular, anything specifically that you have going on?
Yeah. And so I think so it depends on what it is I am doing in the studio will
Okay.
like inform what I need to listen to. But then I also kind of categorize things by like classy or trashy. Like, is it a classy listening day or a trashy listening day? If it's trashy, I am definitely listening to like long form podcasts, like anything on cults, like that.
Me too, girl.
I'm like
You into
obsessed.
Betrayal? Have you listened to Betrayal?
Yes, that is crazy.
Okay, so you on Betrayal too. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And there's one called The Opportunist. There's one called Pretend Podcast that has like kind of long form, like different topics, but like the good ones are on cults. And end of day cults also feel very interesting to me. So that's my trashy. My classy would be like audiobooks. And so I'm listening to one audiobook by like a science fiction writer, N.K. Jemisin, the Broken Earth trilogy. So I think I'm on book 2 right now. And so those either like a long form podcast or audiobook, like I would listen to that if I'm like doing something. So like the work, Marlon, like you asked what I'm working on right now. So like the works that I'm developing right now are like perfect for long form podcasts and audiobooks because I'm like sitting in one like position for like hours and hours and hours, like doing like very specific things. So I'm like still using the hair bonding glue, but I'm like using it as like paint basically for these like works on canvas that are all so like abstract, but that utilize because like like you were saying, Krystle, like I have so many bottles and there's always like a little residue left in the bottles, and it is a very expensive material, so I
max
like
that
also yeah also like very early on, like again, like I'm always like when I'm in the studio, I just try very much to be present and to pay attention to the things that are happening in the space that may not be like actively related to what I'm like, whatever I'm working on currently, but like it's a thing that's in my space, right? That I should be like observant about. And so much work has been created from that process of observing what's happening in my studio. That is not something what like directly linked to what I'm working on right now. And so like some of my work with like cocoa butter, which were also these like abstract sculptures, like developed from when I was like working with that material and like coming into the studio and like seeing how it would like have reacted to its environment and the ways in which the material was like coagulating on surfaces and like just being really drawn and attracted to that, and then making work that kind of centered those things that were happening in the studio when I wasn't there. And so like the same thing for like the bonding glue, like having all of these like thousands of bottles with like some material residue in there, and kind of just from like a fidgeting habit of like I was just like pulling out the material and like kind of just playing with glue, right? This is like a thing kids do. So kind of harking back to just like childhood fidgeting and like playing. Like I was noticing that I was like kind of twisting these little fragments of residue into these like kind of threads, I call them now. And so then that became like a central gesture that I'm utilizing in these like works on canvas. So I'm like using the glue material to make these abstract paintings. but it's like extremely tedious. And it's like really the opposite of how I've been working with the material in those like large scale wall hung sculptures. So yeah, so I'm like sitting for hours and hours, like 12 hours a day, like, you know, creating these compositions with these like little tiny threads and like fragments of like cured pieces. So that's when I need the cults and the science fiction.
Tell us, where is your studio currently? Is it in your home? Is it on campus where you teach?
Yeah, we are not provided with studios. That's a whole other conversation. But so my studio is I recently became a homeowner. Yay!
Congratulations!
Thank you. Yes, I know. And it's like tricky to actually find affordable studio space where I live, which is shocking. But so, you know, when I bought a home or like was looking for homes with my partner, it was like, okay, we need a house where something can be turned into a studio. So we were able to accomplish that. And like I renovated our garage into my studio space. Yay. So that's my primary space. And then I also like rent a space with a group of other artists where like it's like a kind of open shared space. So I use that when I need to work on like any large scale projects. So I kind of work across both of those, but mostly right now working at my home studio.
Wonderful. I love that you have
beautiful.
That brings me right into the question about community and art. It sounds like, especially with this co-working space that you have for larger pieces, you do have a community. Could you tell us who has been a part of that? Is it mostly artists? Is it like a mixed type of community of various academics and people, lay people? And to tell us, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, because so I, you know, the community that I'm in, I recently moved to within the last 3-ish years. So I live in Detroit, or like the Detroit area, and I moved here to take a teaching job, like my first tenure track teaching job.
Yay!
I know, you think it's going to be amazing.
It's complicated.
I finally achieved it. Yes, very complicated is a politically correct term that I
Truth.
But so you know, I'm in a very new community. But it's been, you know, incredibly welcoming and supportive. But actually, the thing that has been so beautiful for me and completely unexpected that I didn't know existed here, and I don't think maybe you would know unless you did live in Detroit or Detroit area, but like the agricultural and like urban farming movement and community is so beautiful, so insanely like expansive, and something that I did not know I cared about, was interested in, or that existed here. But that has been the thing that has completely transformed my making, my thinking, my practice, my desires. And then also like, you know, then owning a home, like I'm like growing all the vegetables that I eat, like in my backyard, you know, like
growing things.
Yes. And my garden, my little farm is right next to, you know, my like art studio. And like both of these things feed off of each other. Yeah. So like the agricultural community here has been like so incredibly supportive. And, you know, it incorporates like artists, you know, in our kind of traditional sense, but like farmers, and like bringing both of those things together. And for me, it's just like purely creatives, right? It's about creative thinking, creative problem solving, and making that doesn't exist just like in this like fine art like market or like market system, you know? And to me, that has actually been the thing in the last few years that's been so generative and so beautiful and really expanding my like conceptions of what it means to be a maker and a thinker, and to be in community, like truly be in community.
Yeah, I love that. I think I have a similar thing as you, where I literally live in the woods. And I know my farmer. I don't have a green thumb. I idealize those that do. However, I've joined a CSA, so I pick up or home vegetables every Friday. That reminds me later I gotta go get my share. But it's such a beautiful thing being so connected to like the thing that, you know, your farmer is growing. Like he sends pictures of like, look what has grown this week.
Yes,
and it's like very interactive. Like every year, it's like the nourishment of that, knowing the love that went into growing your food and being a part of the community of people that is doing that. It's really, really, really like to think that your food trash is going to turn into compost and then support the farmer's work next.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah.
I'm mind blown. Just love it. Love it.
It has changed. Like, learning and knowing how food is grown.
Well, it sounds very symbiotic.
Yes. Yeah. And like it can be a closed loop system, right?
It could be.
Like whatever has come out of the earth and nourished you, and like the remnants of that goes back into the earth and continues to nourish the earth and you. It's like that is perfection to me. That is beautiful. Like, and to exist alongside that. Like, I truly believe every person should know their farmer. I also think every community should have a farm. We shouldn't have these like large scale, like completely detached from community farms, which it's like also problematic because it's hard for like, we see what's like happening to the agricultural systems in just in this country, but globally, right? How it's being negatively impacted by climate change, but also like when you try to like make nature a thing to make money, it resists that, right? And then you have to do all of these things, synthetic fertilizers, like pumping like toxic like materials into the earth to try to extract food that then becomes like a resource that you can buy and sell. Like it's falling apart because that just doesn't work at that scale. Nature is not like predictable in that way. Like you put seeds in the ground and you just have to be thankful for whatever you get in return.
Yeah, agree.
And there are processes and practices that, you know, you can engage in to try to increase yield. But when we get to where we have to poison the seeds and the soil, like that doesn't benefit us or the earth. And, anyways, everyone should know their farmer. Every community should have a farm, and we should like nourish ourselves and the earth. It gives us so much.
Definitely. Certainly.
All right. So let's talk about finances a little bit because, that's always a very touchy subject, especially for artists. So I'm curious, your sales that you make from your artwork, how much do they fund your lifestyle?
Yeah. Well, so I also have a full-time job. So
that helps.
I think that's a succinct answer to that question. But because I have a full-time job, that means I can, meet all of my basic requirements: rent, food, transportation, whatever that may be. And then any income generated from the sale of works or, funds from like a lecture as an artist or commissions, etc., can go directly back into my studio, and taxes, quarterly taxes. Don't forget about that if you're an artist. But it then allows me to do a few things, right? So continue to support my practice by allowing me to continue making work, but it also allows me the freedom to make decisions about what I want to work on and who I want to work with. Because, I do work with galleries, and there have been galleries that have represented me, and sometimes those relationships are great, sometimes they're not. But if you are, solely dependent on the gallery and you don't have any other sources of income, that can create, which this does happen to artists, right? The potential that you may have to do things that you don't want to do because you have to pay rent, right?
Right.
And so, because I have another job, like I was able to leave a gallery that I thought the relationship was not working out. And I was able to do that because I didn't only have to depend on the sale of my work to like live and meet those basic requirements, So definitely having both streams of income, one allows me to make work that may be sellable, may not be sellable. But if it does or doesn't, that's okay. I can still follow my creative trajectory without having to be dependent on the trends of the market, because it's ever shifting, it never stays in the same place. So it gives me the freedom to make the work that I want to make, whether or not it's marketable.
Awesome.
So you shared so much about how you are managing a studio, a working practice. Do you have an assistant, or how are you managing the finances of a studio space?
Well, so I have an assistant that helps me like in the studio, like with aspects of making work, which she is so lovely and wonderful. Sophia, thank you. And I've worked with her for I think it's going on 2 years. So that's the first time I've ever kind of really had someone consistently. But for financial stuff, I mean, I have an accountant, but I have a QuickBooks.
Nice. Those are essential tools.
Those are essential
tools.
Awesome
Awesome to learn that you are also using those similar tools. Okay, I too have an accountant, and I'm considering having an assistant. And I guess I'm always curious how artists are managing. Is it like a contracted relationship, or is it more of like a actual employee established with like some social security benefits that you have to put in and all of that?
Well, so like my art business, it's a sole proprietorship. Like I know some people may have like LLCs or something, but this is what my accountant recommended. Sole proprietorship for an artist, unless you're doing large scale, like public projects or something like that. But
got it.
So she's then an independent contractor.
Okay. Yeah. That's how I would do it as well. At least because of where we are in terms of funding the continued
Yes.
income. Yeah. That makes a whole lot of sense. And
so then, she gets a W-9 or something, pays her taxes, whatnot, which is the same thing I do.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're all independent contractors.
You're right. And as you, for a long term, establish your career and develop your practice, what does the future hold as far as you planning for aging physically, being a performer, but then also aging financially, the expenses that come with that? How do you plan for those things?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of financial, so like I have an SCP, which is like a type of savings account for freelancers, basically.
Yeah, SEP.
SEP, yeah. I forget
SEP.
what the acronym stands for. But
that you can contribute to yearly, right?
Yes, yeah. Which then offsets your tax obligations now under the hope that in the future you make more money and then you'll pay the taxes on that. So we'll see what happens. So that is how I'm thinking about it financially. And again, I also have a full-time job. So there's
benefits
some sort of retirement benefits. Who knows again how this is all going to pan out.
That's if we don't crash and burn with all that stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Hopefully willing it doesn't.
So who knows? But in terms of like, the physical requirements of making work, it's very taxing for artists, no matter how you're working. So one, I exercise more, or I exercise, period, which I never did before.
Awesome.
So again, right, we're not getting any younger. Right. And I was definitely getting to a point where it was like, oh my God, like my just body hurts.
I had the same thing, girl.
Yeah. But who would have thought exercising helps that? So that has become like a central part of my life, like working out. And now it's like something that I actually enjoy, which is so weird. But mental health as well, like farming and gardening, like that mentally has been like just so important to me. And it allows me, right, those moments to like clear my mind, that then I can go back to like this studio space and work in this manner and be able to just really focus, and be able to think of things in the long term, not just like whatever immediate deadlines, but always thinking in the long term about like what I want out of my career and life as a maker.
Beautiful.
And trying to then construct things around that.
And lastly, what are you doing currently that is not paid later? Well, you did talk about farming. That is only for your creative nourishment. Is there anything outside of your patch of land that you are growing on?
That's the main thing. That's the most important thing in terms of like something I do just for myself. Yeah.
And do you have any question for me?
How is teaching going? Like, how are you managing your creative practice and then your life as an educator?
Okay. So I'm going to answer brief and then I'll give you off record.
Yes.
Okay, briefly, I would say that I am enjoying the institution where I am, to be honest. It was a really rough patch in grad school. And so to come to an institution that, yes, there's always room for growth, but to really have welcoming people to work with that are interested in being collaborative in managing students and all that comes with administrative positions, the administrative work you have to do, and additional to teaching and balancing research. I really enjoy where I am, and my commute is long. I drive 4 hours, 8 hours total in a week, but but it's worth it, and I think I still would make the same choice that I did then.
Amazing.
Thank you so much, Allana, for coming and talking with us. You gave us so many different perspectives, and just talking about not only artists, but lifestyle and sustainability, and also just transitioning to a new city and still growing and blossoming. So just thank you so much for that insight on that. But we don't want to leave you without giving you the opportunity to give a shameless plug. So let the people know how we can follow you, and also let us know what's next for you.
Yeah. So I have a website, allanaclarke.com, and I usually keep that updated and post things that I've done and what's coming up. I'm on the Instagram, Allana Clarke Studios or whatever it is. Wait, how do you...
I'll drop that in the description.
Yeah. I'm bad at the internet, obviously.
Yeah. That is okay. Thank you for listening to our episode. The Hidden Critique is produced and hosted by us, Krystle Lemonias and Marlon Tobias. Episodes are edited by Kirsten Pettifor. Original music composed by Cesar Presa.
If you like the show, you can review and rate this podcast via Spotify. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on our YouTube page.
For exclusive bonus content, subscribe to our Patreon at The Hidden Critique.